Hello there everyone, my name is Kirsten and today's topic for this video is going to be something I haven't done in a very long time, and that is to have a one-on-one connection with you guys about talking about my personal life and things like that. It's been a long time since I've actually done like a proper sit down and chat kind of videos in a very long time. I believe it was like around a month ago, maybe a couple months ago. I'm not quite too sure, but I just figured I would go ahead and do that anyway. Oh, in case if you guys were wondering, yes, I finally had a chance to, of course, get my hair cut. And I decided not to wear any makeup today simply because I don't know if you guys can tell from this camera or not, but I'm experiencing a few little breakouts right here, so I'm just deciding to let my skin breathe for today. So that is definitely the reason why I decided not to put on any sort of makeup for today. So with that being out of the way, I've been wanting to make this video for quite some time actually, but I just kind of figured I would go ahead and get settled into my house first before I went ahead and talked about this subject in particular. So before I completely begin into this topic, if you guys are new to this channel and if you haven't done so already, please do consider subscribing to my channel with notifications on. I upload brand new videos every single Friday. So with that being out of the way, I am gonna go ahead and get started into this topic in particular. So about a month ago, which was April, that is when I moved into Texas. If you guys have not seen that video where I did a road trip from California into Texas, I'll be sure to link it up in the cards for you guys to go ahead and check out. But basically, now that I got settled into my new house, I figured I would go ahead and share this personal side to my story. I've been debating about this for a long time, mostly because it's something that I don't necessarily talk about. Like, very rarely will I ever talk about like my personal issues and whatnot, but I'm basically going to be explaining to you guys in full detail of why I ultimately decided to leave California when I actually did. So for those of you that do not know, I'm originally from Indiana. I grew up in Indiana all the way up until 9 years old. So by the time I turned 9 years old, that's when my folks decided to move into California. And we lived there for a very long time, all the way up until I moved to a different state again. So we lived in California from the time I was around 9-10 years old, all the way up until I turned 26 years old, which is a very long time to be living in California. So doing the math in my head, I would think I was in California for a good total of 18 years, almost 20 years, which is quite a lot to just be living in California generally. So I can't necessarily explain the reasons why I moved there, because number one, I was pretty young, and at that time I didn't have proper communication with my folks and whatnot, so that's part of the reason why I can't really explain into full detail of why I moved into California. But the only thing I can say is that there was a lot of drama that was revolved around between both of my parents, and I'm guessing that's part of the reason why we moved. But if I had to make a guess of why we originally moved there to begin with, it was definitely because my grandfather retired, and that's when he decided to move out into California. So when I first moved into California, I lived in Morgan Hill for about a year or two. And then we had to move into Hollister, mostly because the housing was getting really expensive, and that was part of the reason why we ultimately decided to move down there, because at one point the housing was getting pretty expensive and we couldn't afford it, so that was definitely part of the reason why. So living in Hollister for quite some time, I obviously 100% did not like it whatsoever. Basically, Hollister was the only area in California we could be able to afford to live, basically. The worst part about it is with any typical small town areas, there isn't hardly much to do, so me being a young teenager and stuff, I literally got bored every single time, and so the only time I could get away from my hometown was to visit my folks in Indiana. So in a way, it kind of like became a win-win situation. My dad got to move back in with us as soon as he got out of prison, and I was able to see my mom and especially my other folks into Indiana. There was a lot of drama that happened between my parents and stuff, even after the fact that I grew up and stuff, which I can't really explain much detail of. Maybe I'll explain it more better in the future, but the only thing I can say is that there was a lot of drugs involved, and there was a lot of fighting involved and things like that. My aunt and my uncle, as well as my cousin, decided to move out into California with us because it was hard enough just being away from them as long as it was. So when we first moved into California, obviously things were pretty nice and it wasn't nearly as bad until like all the way up until my folks and I almost did decided to move. Part of the reason why we ultimately moved down to Texas to begin with was because of my aunt and my uncle. Obviously, their business was pretty bad to the point where they had to pay so much business taxes in order to keep their business going, which made it a lot more expensive. So that was part of the reason why we decided to move down there, was because it was hard enough just being away from my aunt and my uncle as it was. But before I get into that part, the thing that sucked the most is the jobs that I wanted to apply for were either so far up north or far down south. I don't want to explain too much into details about this, but the more I lived in California, the more I hated it. The only thing I can say is that everything was so expensive, the housing was expensive, and you'd have to travel so far just to be able to enjoy yourself and even get a good career. So I am not even kidding you. Some people will drive from Hollister to San Francisco just to work, just because the housings up there in those real big areas are too expensive to live. So with people living in California, there was obviously a lot of travel involved. When I lived in Hollister, I basically was there from elementary school all the way up until I finished college, pretty much. So I graduated from high school, and then after I graduated high school, that's when I decided to go into a community college. Obviously, during my college years, it was completely fine and everything, all the way up until my dad passed away. So with me being stressed out about living in the state, on top of my dad passing away, it obviously created more stress for myself to the point where I actually did thought about suicide. Which is funny, coming from somebody like me, because I'm normally like a happy, optimistic type of person, and there was a lot of things living there that made it pretty difficult. Some of the stuff is too emotional for me to talk about, but it was like I couldn't even live a life. After I graduated college, I tried finding a job related to what I graduated with, And it was hard enough just trying to find a job from there because, like I said again, it was tough in the area where I lived simply because there wasn't enough resources to have the job that I really wanted to apply for to begin with. And the stress of living in the area where I lived on top of trying to find a job that I ultimately enjoy was very, very tough. I think my biggest regret about going to college is the fact that I haven't had a chance to start working part-time and going to college part-time, which really sucked. So with my dad that passed away in a motorcycle accident back in 2015, which is almost 3 years ago, I can't believe how much time flies. The area that I lived in, on top of trying to find a job to work in, was stressful enough as it is. Even if I tried to apply for retail jobs, for some weird reason, nobody would be able to accept to hire me. So the only thing I could do was to volunteer at my local library where I lived. I was just so stressed out, and I was just so emotionally exhausted with the fact of just living in California because of the fact that I couldn't find a job and the fact that I felt like the town that I absolutely hated, I felt like I was just stuck there. Living in California to me didn't feel like a place to live. It felt like I was just really stuck there. I think there was also a lot of problems into California with all of their laws that they changed and stuff, which of course I'm not going to be talking into politics or nothing like that, simply because it's just a waste of breath and I just honestly don't give a shit. But so eventually my folks ended up seeing that for sure, and the fact that, unless you come from a wealthy family, you may as well just forget about living there altogether. At least that's how I viewed it. Because with my grandparents, they could afford to live out there no problem. But people that are around my age, maybe younger, or somebody that's around my aunt's age, it's tougher for them just to be able to afford to live, basically. It sucks because there could have been so many awesome things done to the state, and the older I got living there, I felt like it just crashed and just slowly went downhill for me, just the more I lived there and such. My grandparents eventually got to notice it for sure, and with the fact that my aunt and my uncle decided to move there to begin with, that's when we all decided, you know what, just fuck it. We're just gonna leave and go. And eventually we did, starting around the first week of April. And so far, I have been living in Texas ever since. And I feel like being able to live in the Texas area, I felt like so many heavy weights just lifted off of my shoulder, and I just feel ultimately so happy. I feel like my mental state was definitely a lot more better, considering the fact that the area I lived in had a lot of resources and jobs available, and to that I could not be more happier. I could not be happier just being able to live in an area where I feel like you can finally actually be able to live, which is really awesome. It absolutely sucks that California is not getting any better the more pricier everything gets and the more difficult it is to actually live there for very many different reasons, because it's just too bad and it makes me sick, because there could have been a lot of really awesome things that could have been done to California, and unfortunately, the reality of it is that it's not getting any better anytime soon. And again, with any popular states per se, like Hawaii and Illinois and New York, it's really impossible to make a really good, decent living unless you come from a wealthy family. Then it's just impossible to be able to have a decent living, like I said again. And it sucks because I have really big ambitions and I have so many goals that I had in mind, just being able to live there generally. And honestly, even if I had all the money in the world, I still could not be able to afford to live out there pretty much. So I'm just very happy just being where I'm at pretty much. And like I said again, living in Texas now, I could not be more happier with the area that I live in, where there's so many resources available. You don't have to travel too far to go to any place when the things you need are readily available right here where you live. And there are a lot of jobs hiring, which makes it even more awesome to be able to live pretty much. I feel like I've rambled on long enough, and I feel like at this point I'm just repeating myself, but I just wanted to get this off of my chest to kind of share with you guys of the reasons why I ultimately lived there to begin with. Why I ultimately left California to begin with. So I just thought I would share that with you guys to explain into personal depth and whatnot. So that is pretty much it for everything I had to share on why I ultimately left California. So I hope you guys enjoyed what I had to share, or that you felt like you were pretty much informed of my situation living in California and whatnot. So if you did, be sure to sucker punch that like button down below. Comment down below as well. Let me know your thoughts and feelings. And of course, if you're new here and if you haven't done so already, please do dedicate the time and effort to subscribe to my lovely channel, join my little army of darkness, and if you hit that notification button, you will be updated with brand new videos every single Friday. If you guys are interested in following me outside of YouTube, all of my social medias will be listed in the description box right down below if you are indeed interested in checking them out yourself. Thank you guys so much for watching, and thank you guys so much for understanding my whole little situation. I promise to you guys that a normal video will be up relatively soon. So take care. Bye for now.